years old, and my family and I went every year to a place called Lake Chelan in the Cascades of Washington State. We were making our annual trip, and I was really excited because there was going to be kids up at this retreat. It's up 17 miles up from Lake Chelan, and you have to take a ferry a pretty long way down the lake. You get on a bus, and you go 17 miles up the mountain to an old mining town that they turn into like a rustic campsite retreat. So it was getting towards fall, about August, and the first thing I noticed were there were no chipmunks this year. There were a lot of tame chipmunks that would come up and eat out of your hand, and they were mysteriously missing. There were about 4 other children that were there, so it was a really small gathering. And at the end of the weekend, we decided after the last dinner that everyone had in the common areas that all of us kids were going to go out and have a game of hide and go seek. So all the kids were around my age, around 10 to 12. But there was this one older boy, and I thought, I don't want him to find me. I want to win this game. So I decided I'm going to go the farthest out from the light source. And it was such a small gathering that some of these cabins weren't being used. There was a maintenance building. And I thought, gosh, if I just get far enough out of the firelight, maybe he won't find me. So as this kid was counting to 50, I ran as fast as I could to behind a really dark cabin or maintenance shed. I don't remember which. There were a lot of wood piles back behind the buildings. I got just out of the big camp firelight. And as I whipped around the corner, I heard something that sounded like something really large shifted in the gravel on hardpan, really loud. And I stopped to let my eyes adjust, and I thought, oh no, somebody's had the same idea as me. There's a kid that's come from the other side of the building. This building's probably, 12, maybe 15 feet long. So I stopped and held my breath and let my eyes adjust. And I watched the wood pile behind the building stand up. And it kept coming up and kept coming up. And pretty soon it was going to hit the overhang off the back of the building. So it had to do this really weird move where it kind of snaked around the overhang, and it kept standing up. And I watched it in a silhouette form come out and stand from the side of the building, and I was about 12 foot away from it. And of course, to a 10-year-old kid, this is a 20-foot tall monster. It had to have been over 7.5 feet for the overhang for it to have to move because it was going to hit its head. So I don't remember a whole lot about the legs or anything like that because I just kept watching the head and shoulders come up. And it did not make a sound after the hard pan on gravel sound, which I think it did on purpose so that I wasn't going to hide behind it. And I remember fur because I remember seeing the whole silhouette, but I don't remember a lot of details other than I kept watching these head and shoulders come up and up and up. It did stand out. I do remember hair hanging. I remember that it didn't have a neck. It had kind of sloping shoulders, and it was massive. Now, growing up in the woods, my family told me, don't ever turn your back on a wild animal or run. But that's exactly what I did. It didn't make a sound. I didn't smell anything. I didn't hear anything. And it didn't move right. It moved kind of liquidy, like it didn't have bones. I ran right back past the kid that was looking for me, and I ran straight to my folks who were hanging out with the other adults around the big campfire, and screamed, bear, man bear, there's a bear or a man. And of course, everyone got a little freaked out that there was, in fact, a bear or a weirdo, although that would be pretty weird considering where we were. And, the guys all got up and went back there to check to make sure it wasn't a bear that had been lured in. But I was told that that's what it was, that it was a bear that stood up on its hind legs. So for years, I thought, my God, Washington State has the biggest bear ever. I thought black bears must be massive. And I never thought about it being a Sasquatch until I had an epiphany about, I don't know, fast forward 3 decades later, when I took my son and my stepson to a wild game farm. And we were watching the bears, grizzly bears included, play and stand up and throw massive tires around. And I watched the way they moved, and I watched how they stood up and what they looked like. And I thought, my God, it kind of made me think back to, gosh, we don't have grizzly bears in Washington State, and we certainly don't have polar bears, but this was the size of a polar bear. And it just kind of sparked my memory. So I went to one of the gals that was working there, and I asked, hey, do you happen to know if we have grizzly bears in Washington State, or do the grizzly bears get any bigger than this? And I told her my story, and she stopped and she looked at me and she said, ma'am, are you sure that wasn't a Sasquatch? And I kind of went, oh, wow, epiphany. And so that kind of sparked my interest in the subject. I'd always been into folklore and mythology and the Loch Ness Monster and any of those kind of things, but I never really was into Sasquatch so much. And that's how I ended up starting to go to these events and the conventions and get a little more information. And that's how Tobe and I met, was at one of these conventions. I did have a second sighting 37 years after this one. It was during the daytime this time, and it was from further away, thank heavens. And it was a little bit different. It jumped out in front of my car, but it was probably about 100 feet away, maybe a little more. I didn't get to see the face. It's like it had a flat profile, and it looked like a massive guy in a ghillie suit. I mean, it looked like a moss man. It looked like it was furry, but covered, like it had put moss on itself, like a mane flowed out behind it. And I couldn't believe what I saw. It's like it sprung up and jumped across this giant road, didn't quite make it, hit a mud puddle with its heel, which splashed out. And I thought, okay, if I see that mud puddle's disturbed, I know I saw something. I wasn't imagining things. So I went and drove as fast as I could to this mud puddle. And I stopped and I got out, and sure enough, that shallow mud puddle was just disturbed in that little area. And when I didn't hear anything, and when I went to look where it would have gone, it was all Devil's Club, like really tall Devil's Club. So I've been lucky enough, I guess, to have 2 sightings. One during the night, very, very close, and one thankfully further away during the daytime.